What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Just an Editor podcast. My name is Corey Cudney, and I am just an editor. But today we have a first. We actually have two guests on that, if I counted correctly on IMDb, we have over 35 projects between the two of them. They each have credits like writer, director, producer, and most recently, they tag team the edit of the upcoming film, The End of Us, that was featured in South by Southwest. Today we have Henry Loevner and Steven Kanter.
How's it going?
Yeah,
Thanks for having
excited
us.
to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and everything. I mentioned it in last week's episode that for these episodes, I always love having something that is super unique and super cool. And I want to start just off the top with the movie that I mentioned a minute ago, The End of Us. For anybody who's listening that hasn't heard of it, it is the story, a really, really well told story, in my opinion, of a couple who breaks up right at the beginning of COVID and has to quarantine together. So off the top, I just want to ask you, how did you guys come up with this? Where did this come from?
Back in the spring of 2020, I think like right when lockdown started, Steve and I, we're both, we're roommates, we're both filmmakers. We had sort of all of our projects obviously got canceled. Steve and I were talking about things we could try to shoot together, things we could make to just sort of like pass the time at the beginning of the pandemic. And it just so happened that our good friend Ben Coleman, who's an actor, was going through a breakup at the time. He and his long-term girlfriend were ending things like right as the pandemic began, and they ended up getting stuck living together. And the circumstances of their breakup were very, very different from what you see in the movie. But, our conversations with him, definitely, a lot of inspiration drawn from real life. And we all started chatting about, whether it was possible to put some kind of project together.
Fortunately, both Ben and his ex-girlfriend, we got their blessing. It was, it wasn't a scenario where we were like, hey, give us your life story and we're going to make a movie. We were like, I think he may have even been like, yeah, it's like, it feels like a movie, like, concept or log line. And we were like, yeah,
that's amazing.
And so, but as Henry mentioned, we took that as a jumping off point, and then we kind of went into development and writing, and, it became the film that it is today.
Yeah. And on top of that, like we're part of the same pandemic bubble with Claudia Restrepo, who is also my girlfriend, and she's a filmmaker, producer, director. And so the three of us were really like trying to conceive of a project we could work on together. So this just seemed like something, realistic that we could make with just the three of us. And then, essentially two actors. We had the benefit of knowing how to do most things sort of in-house. We owned our own cameras and lighting equipment and stuff like that. So we were like, you know what? We don't have anything else to do for the next few months. Everything's shut down. So like, let's just go for it.
So how long did it take you guys, like from concepting to starting the filming? How long did that take to kind of get it all, scripted out and everything?
I think the writing process was, the whole project was certainly very, very expedited. Part of us sort of approaching, making a film about, the pandemic, as it was actually unfolding, we were like, well, let's see if we can get this out and make this as fast as we can, because we didn't really have much else going on. But the actual writing and development, I'd say, was probably around 3.5 weeks that Henry and I were sort of kicking around ideas. And, we've called it either a short script or a long treatment, because we sort of, had a very, very detailed sort of, beat sheet outline, with some pages, but we also kind of knew that just in how fast we were moving, we were going to be relying on a lot of sort of improvisation along the way and being able to sort of move as fast as we could, just given how small the crew was. And that's kind of what happened. So, we kicked around the idea for a while, about 3 weeks. And then as we were doing that, we were already looking for, an Airbnb that would be able to, be the primary location for the film. And of course, figuring out all the COVID, precautions and guidelines took up just as much of our time, it felt like.
Yeah, that was exactly one of the things I was going to ask, is how in the world was it to film this movie like when we're in the middle of this, so like things are still coming out, hot and fresh all the time news wise. So trying to navigate film, regulations and everything like that. Like, did you guys just like, I would assume you just limited the sets to just like, all right, just you two actors, because there's only really ever two people in any scene at a time anyway. So
Yeah. That was obviously, by design. We took really great pains to try to conceive of a way to shoot this safely. And this was obviously very early in the pandemic. So, the film industry in general hadn't established very clear rules and guidelines. And in particular, we were lucky, again, it was such a small team that we could make things very safe. So the biggest thing we did was sort of like had everyone quarantined for 2 weeks before we even moved into the Airbnb. So the five of us were like, okay, you can't even go to the grocery store. You got to stay in your house for 2 weeks, do nothing.
Mhm.
And then we all got tested just to be extra safe, moved into the Airbnb. And then once we were there, kind of like locked in, the five of us, we just made sure no going in and out, no interacting with people outside the Airbnb. We got all our food delivered, and there are a few other actors who appear in the film, but we were lucky that we were able to, either shoot those scenes in a socially distant way outside, or if they did need to be a little bit closer, like Derek DeBlasis, who plays the Tim character,
Mhm.
we also had him tested and go through the sort of the 2 weeks of quarantining as well. So it was tough. It was really hard. But again, we were just lucky that like Ali Vingiano and Ben Coleman, our two leads, were down and like were so excited and ready to sort of put up with living and shooting in the same space for sort of 2 weeks. Not a lot of people would be willing to do that. So
So how was it from y'all's perspective? Because one of the biggest moments for me that like just got me cracking up, and it's not even really supposed to, but we're just so close to this still. There's a scene where she's arriving at work and her friend on the phone is like, "Oh yeah, they shut down the NBA," and she's like, "They closed the NBA?" And I just remember that being such a pivotal moment for so many people. So how was it like filming this and everything, being referential, like while we're in the middle of it? Was it just like crazy to be like, hey, yeah, people are going to watch this in 5 or 10 years and be like, that happened?
Yeah, that's one of our favorite moments as well. I mean, it's interesting because, of course, we started shooting this. By the time we were shooting it and like where the story takes place, I mean, we're, I guess, like, a couple of months sort of ahead of when the story takes place. So we were like, just out of necessity trying to, as the film is sort of tracking the relationship over, the first few months of the lockdown,
Hmm.
the first thing we were thinking about was like, well, what were sort of the landmark kind of moments in sort of the timeline that we just experienced? And, the NBA shutting down being one of them, because it was right in that first week. And it was the first, one of the first sort of major closures going on in daily life. And so that was sort of part of it, and it was an interesting challenge in writing to sort of think about. And we had the benefit, of course, of just having gone through it. So it was sort of like,
Hmm.
what are the sort of timeline of things that were occurring, when a Fauci press conference, or when there was, an uptick in Los Angeles, which of course the film takes place. And so we were trying to be, as Henry mentioned, as sort of reactive and iterative as we went along, as we possibly could.
Nice. So one of the big things, End of Us was just at South by Southwest, which due to COVID was actually a virtual event. How was it, to have your film at a South by Southwest, even though it was, virtual, like just still having it at South by is probably super cool.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that definitely is a dream come true for all of us. We've been, huge fans of the festival. We've never had anything screened there before until this year, and so we were absolutely shocked and delighted when we found out. We had no, real expectation of getting in when we submitted. So it was wonderful, and despite the fact that it was all virtual, I think they did a pretty amazing job of putting on the event and
Hmm.
still trying to foster a sense of community and connection with the other filmmakers. So, we had the opportunity to still meet lots of people, and
Oh, nice.
but it was definitely surreal. I look forward to doing the in-person festival in the future too, because it was a unique experience.
Well, and it was strangely fitting too. Speaking of major events, from what I remember, South by Southwest was also the first sort of major conference or festival that was canceled completely
Yeah.
due to COVID, and weirdly fitting that sort of throughout this whole process, that would be the festival that we ended up screening. So it was
like a big full circle.
yeah, exactly.
And then one of the big things that I saw in the press release and everything for the film was that you guys chose to do it all within the Adobe Creative Cloud program. So, what kind of drove that decision, and why did you guys decide to go with the Adobe programs?
Steve and I have been using Premiere kind of forever. I mean, years ago used Final Cut, but
Hmm.
that's just the suite of applications we've all just kind of gotten used to and are comfortable with. So I don't think there was necessarily any question of us using anything else.
Hmm.
So we were really, I mean, we were very lucky that we had very few sort of technical issues or challenges along the way, and no small part thanks to I think the software great, just
Yeah.
made a lot of things possible for us. I mean, it's kind of amazing that we were able to make the movie with sort of like 2 or 3 people, and it's again thanks to the fact that like we can use a combination of After Effects or Audition or whatever to do so much of our post stuff in house.
Yeah, it was crazy watching, as an editor myself who uses the Adobe Creative Cloud. It was crazy watching when he goes into a cabin and you see the laptop has a low battery overlay put on. And I'm sitting here going, all right, did they like use the tracker in AE and like, impose it on there? Like, I was like, I bet that's what they did for that. Like,
I think that's exactly what we did. Yeah, I can't remember if that shot was like on sticks or not, or if we had to stabilize anything. But yeah, that's exactly what we did. Again, it's like because it's like a small kind of romantic comedy. Fortunately, we didn't have too much stuff in the way of VFX,
yeah.
but there was there are a few moments in there that we're proud of. Some nice getting rid of mic packs and stuff like that. I think we did a pretty good
Oh,
job.
awesome. That's super cool. One of the things that stuck out to me, I'm a sucker for this, are the title cards that you guys have. As the movie progresses, you see like day, whatever, and it's in this awesome handwriting. I I wrote this down and it's such a silly question, but I have to ask. Is that a font pack you guys found or is that just one of y'all's handwriting?
Great question. Yeah, I think in earlier cuts we had used a kind of handwritten font, but that's actually some wonderful
Mhm.
title design by our good friend Tom Carroll, who is an artist and a filmmaker and just a good buddy of ours. And incidentally, he used to be a sign painter at Trader Joe's. He used to work at Trader Joe's, and like if you go to a TJ's, like all of the signs there are like specific to that story and they're all hand drawn. And so he used to do that professionally. So he does like, fantastic title work.
Oh my gosh. That was like such a cooler answer to that than I thought. I'd just be like, yeah, one of us wrote it down and I took a picture of the piece of paper. Like,
Oh yeah, we got a
Yeah.
real professional.
Yeah, we'll have to take all of his all the symbols and work them into an official font. We'll call it the End of Us font and
Yeah.
get it up
oh
on
my gosh, I
Typekit.
love it. Speaking of things that stuck out to me during the film, tell me if I'm just imposing my own experience on this, but there is a moment in the film where Leah gets obsessed with the virus and starts going on a research binge, if you will. And I was watching this and I was like, all right, this is very Edgar Wright. Did you guys have like an Edgar Wright moment where they're like, this is what it's fitting, or am I just like reading into that?
I think definitely that's not far off. I think it's an interesting sequence because it's a bit of kind of a standalone sequence where we really sort of allow ourselves to have I suppose just a little bit more fun with sort of conveying a style and really trying to get into her mind as sort of an anxious kind of neurotic type. And I mean certainly Henry and I are no strangers to anxiety
Yeah,
and
Doom
anxiety as
scrolls.
represented in film. And yeah, I think and Edgar Wright, of course, both of us huge fans of his work growing up, and it's hard not to be a fan of his stuff and just how dynamic and
Mhm.
kinetic it is, and how much he uses sound
I think we
and
also
editing.
talked about like Requiem and
Certainly,
some
yeah.
other movies for that. But yeah, again, like for that kind of genre of film, the sort of mumblecore romantic comedy, there are only a few moments in there that had that sense of style, and so
Mhm.
we tried to have as much fun with it as we could.
That is such a good call out to because that is a real I didn't even think about it until you said it. Like that's a really good way to convey anxiety and everything is these quick cuts and then showing like the coffee cup filling up for the third time or whatever. And it's like that's a super cool way to convey that.
Yeah, it was fun. We're we and part of that too is like, as we were sort of developing it, we were like, just as much as coming up with sort of the external kind of timeline of how COVID was, of course we were drawing from, experiences that we felt, and not to throw ourselves under the bus, but we certainly kind of, fell into the trap early on, as so many of us did, of just refreshing the New York Times, infection list, and just like, it's like the worst parts of social media, kind of the same
Mhm.
the same process, where you're just sort of, you become addicted to sort of the negativity. And a lot of that was drawing from some unfortunate kind of just feelings that we had at certain points
Yeah.
at the start of the process. So
So you guys said that y'all are roommates and you've known each other. Was this y'all's first like actual project working together?
We've done a couple of small things here or there.
Mhm.
Certainly nothing of this even close to this scale. And I mean, honestly, I think the last thing we worked on together before this was also with Ben Coleman,
Oh, no.
and it was like 3 or 4 years ago when we made like a sketch, basically.
yeah,
Similarly about a toxic couple.
yeah,
But yeah, Steven and I, we worked together for years at BuzzFeed, doing short films, digital series, that kind of thing. And we were on part of the same team, and we really admired each other's work and would like compare notes all the time, but didn't really have too many opportunities to actually collaborate on something.
How was the process? I guess really the question is like, how did y'all tackle the editing? Did y'all do it as a joint with somebody looking over the other one's shoulder, or what was the process?
yeah. That was a big sort of question, kind of going into it, and we sort of it's funny, we were like, well, we'll figure it out when we get to post. Let's just see if we can make it through this movie. And ultimately we sort of landed on, we pulled open sort of our treatment, and we had all the scenes, and we just sort of like went chunk by chunk and just sort of color coded them back and forth. And so we actually we split the edit down the middle. And so we each of us had like 6 or 7 sequences with a collection of scenes, and we kind of went off and did those on our own. And then
Oh.
it was helpful, because we were able to, once we were sending each other cuts, it was like the other person was seeing that sequence for the first time, and so we were able to kind
Mhm.
of benefit from at least a little bit of, hopefully, objectivity, um,
Yeah.
and be able to use each other in that sense. But
It
yeah,
was interesting too, because I think when we first started editing, we were not even physically in the same space. Once we wrapped, we were like, okay, I'm sick of you. I don't want to see you for like 2 months. And so I got in my car and drove to Wyoming, and then Steve got in his car and drove to Nevada. And then we were both editing independently, but it was cool because like when we started swapping cuts, granted, we both were using the same references of films that we were interested in and trying to emulate on some level, but like we didn't really know that we were going to be fully on the same page stylistically. And
Mhm.
we were very lucky that we really weren't very far off, and we kind of had the same vision for the project. So
yeah, I think, and that was also sort of a fortunate thing about the collaboration from a writing and directing standpoint too. It's like we really like, I think we kind of went in knowing that if we were going to do this together, like we really have a lot of respect for each other's taste and opinions, and fortunately there's a lot of shared taste. And it's like, obviously there are millions of things that come up when just simply shooting a project, like where it could go one way or it could go another. And I think we've managed to, just simply out of respect, be able to sort of rationally kind of talk through and hear each other out. And I think that carried over in the edit as well.
That's really cool. You guys mentioned earlier in the episode that you kind of used a lot of equipment that you guys already had, and a lot of the techniques that you had already learned. So for something like this is a BuzzFeed produced film, correct?
yeah, that's right. It's sort of an interesting collaboration with them. Essentially, Stephen and Claudia and I made the film ourselves over the spring and summer, and then BuzzFeed came on in the fall, winter as an executive producer once we were in post production to help us with essentially with marketing the film and
Hmm.
get finding an audience for it. And they've been great in terms of also helping us try to find distribution and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been an interesting collaboration.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was about to ask, was the process for that, because I feel like normally it's like the reverse, where you hit up the studios and they pay for everything, but since you guys like front loaded everything, it seems like it would be a more interesting partnership there.
Yeah, and it was helpful too. I mean, as Henry mentioned, we met during our time at BuzzFeed, and actually, pretty much, yeah, I'm pretty sure that everybody in the film, the other actors, at some point or another, we actually met them through sort of our working experience at BuzzFeed, and so part of also what we kind of learned, working in the digital space was, how to try to be all phases of production, at once. Obviously, the world of YouTube is, you've got a lot of content creators and short form filmmakers that are sort of out of necessity, and it's really helpful to be able to just like know how to edit, something that you've written, and the actors in the film as well were producers and have had sort of the mindset of producers, which of
Oh.
course is really helpful as well because we needed all hands on deck when we were shooting this puppy.
There were even a few moments when we asked Ben and Allie, our two leads, to like, hey, would you mind like holding the boom, or like, can you, can you run
Oh, that's
sound? Can you
awesome.
move this light? And they know how to use all the gear. I mean,
Yeah.
so that was very fortunate.
So before I move off of the end of us and we go to your guys' beginning, I have a super like sentimental type question, I guess. But because of the topic and everything that the movie deals with, what are you guys kind of hoping that people take away from this film? Like I mentioned earlier, in like 5 years, or even in like the next year when the film starts dropping on VOD and stuff. What are you guys kind of hoping that people take away from it?
It's a good question. I mean, well, it's one of the things that we've talked about, and it's almost been reinforced by the process of finally getting the film out there at South by Southwest and starting to see the reactions and see the response, which has been really exciting. For us, it's obviously this is a first of all, we're not out of it yet. It's
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing to tell a story about, and we wanted to make sure that first and foremost, this was like a universal story about these two characters and about their relationship, and that it's not just a sort of riding on a pandemic wave, if you will. And
Hmm.
one of the things that we kind of felt, and hopefully this is part of sort of the response of the film, is like for us it's unexpected sort of nostalgia. Obviously, there's a lot of things in the film that are sort of marking really negative, scary
Hmm.
moments in all of our shared experience, but that like you know, sometimes we forget that, even in the darkest of times, if you will, there are, moments that are unexpectedly positive, and there's always an opportunity for growth and for change. And I think that was a really big part of us thinking about this film, is like we knew this was not going, we didn't want this movie to be a bummer. We didn't want this to just be a, hey, let's relive a terrible experience. We were hoping that we could find really small specific moments in these characters' lives and their journey, that in being able to stay home and smell the roses, like kind of in that sense, that there are yeah, unexpected positives, even in the worst of times.
Yeah, and just like as filmmakers too, I think that I've thought a lot about how in the future there will of course be countless movies that are going to be made about this time, and many of them will have the benefit of a lot. Many years will have passed. People will have time to reflect on their experience during the pandemic, and those films will be made. Hopefully when the pandemic's over, and they'll have a very unique perspective, and I think that's great. But I think that I'm very excited and proud of the film as a piece of art that was made actually while it was happening. I think that's very unusual for film, because
Yeah.
films take a long time to make. They usually take a long time to write. And so, to be honest, I think it's in many ways just a testament to how the technology has changed, where like people are very unused to seeing a feature film that is made like so recently and is talking about something that's just happened. They're just not like, if whether it be music or an article you read in the Atlantic or whatever, people are more accustomed to that kind of commentary, but very unused to it in feature films. And so to me, that's a really exciting part of it, is like, this is just feels unique.
I feel like you guys nailed it. It was something that I was talking about it with my brother, and he was like, I just don't know. And I'm like, man, like when this comes out, like you need to see it, because it's like I feel like you guys took it like really seriously, and like you said, there's a lot of really good just moments in there that it's like, oh, these are really nice, and a lot of sweet moments that happen in it too. But like I've been saying a million times, the movie's called The End of Us. As soon as it comes out, I think it's an awesome piece to check out. But that is the here and that is the now. I want to go all the way back with you guys, and it's going to be interesting since there are two of y'all. But I'm pretty excited because you guys coming up through Buzzfeed, it sounds like, have a very similar yet more advanced trajectory that I did coming up through YouTube and Let's Plays and everything like that. So I'll just start with, Henry, like, where did you get like your inspiration? What got you started into editing and video production?
Yeah. Well, I have a kind of maybe unusual background for someone um, directing film now. Other than making some short videos and sketches and stuff with my friends when I was maybe in middle school,
Hmm.
I was very interested in film when I was younger, but I did not go to film school. I studied political science and Chinese in college.
Oh, wow.
Did not really do anything film related at the time other than, watch tons of movies. But was interested in it. And I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't know anyone who worked in the film business. I didn't know anyone who worked in entertainment. And I had a kind of strange trajectory. I graduated college and then I moved to Shanghai, not really sure what I wanted to do, but was interested in film. I initially worked as like an analyst for this investment advisory company, which was just not interesting to me at all. And so I transitioned. I got a job with a production company there, basically as a Chinese translator,
Oh, wow.
and like an intern. And I worked there for a couple of years, and I just sort of learned soup to nuts, like the basics of production, particularly at that time for advertising. And I was like getting interested in screenwriting and starting to make my own little shorts and sketches and stuff like that. And then just sort of naturally developed from there to moved to LA, kept writing, eventually found a job at Buzzfeed, and then finally started picking up the more technical skills of like learning how to edit, learning how to shoot. Which because other than a little bit of editing, I hadn't known how to. Hadn't used a camera before. Hadn't done any lighting, anything like that. So that all came a little bit later.
Wow, nice. So, like, getting started doing the shorts and everything, how do you feel editing a short versus what you guys are editing now? It's like full on features.
Yeah, I mean, it's an entirely different ballgame. I think with a short, you just well, I'll say with a feature, questions that start to arise, new questions that start to arise are things like how do I maintain stylistic continuity throughout the film? Even just the sort of the logistics of organizing your post production workflow becomes a huge task.
Hmm.
And you really feel like sometimes you're sort of trying to boil the ocean. There's just so much to consider. There's so much media to organize. There's just on the basis of organizing the story becomes very, very challenging. And like you get so deep into the edit, it's very difficult to see the forest for the trees. And so you become very reliant. For me anyway, I became very reliant on getting outside opinions, getting friends to watch the film who were fresh to the material.
This is kind of a weird question, but do you feel like you have any special, I guess, attributes or anything coming from initially an outside perspective, going into translator and then becoming, director and what you are now and learning everything slowly but surely? Does it feel weird kind of coming in from an outside perspective a little bit later on to where you are now?
That's a good question. I guess I would say that I did not go to film school, so I can't really speak to like what kind of education that Steve, for example, may have received. I do think that I really prioritize like this sort of self starter entrepreneurial mentality of like just do everything yourself, learn how to do everything yourself. Extremely practical, whether it be putting stuff up on YouTube, whatever. I didn't come to the table with like romantic notions about like shooting something on film and then screening it in a movie theater. Like that just was never
Mhm.
something I thought about. And so that I think has been helpful. And just in the sense of like being very focused on an audience first mentality, like trying to make stuff that people actually want to watch and you can put online and people are going to want to watch and share. And just learning that you can do all this stuff yourself. Cause I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Steve, but some film programs it seems to me like I've heard that they're very focused on being like, okay, you are going to go to the school and you're going to learn how to be a DP, or you're going to learn how to be a director or an editor. And like, that's your job. And it's very focused. And like, whereas in the real world, like, or certainly making stuff for YouTube, it's like, you got to learn how to do everything.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I guess I'll get into it when you ask me, but yeah, I think that's certainly the case. And of course I learned that from from going through it. But you know, well, there's a reason, you know, there's sites, you know, called No Film School. And there's it's because it can be, I do think it can be, and it is very beneficial, and it's you take from it what you take from it. And I mean, at least in my experience with film school, I think the thing I kind of realized coming out of it was like, the education is one thing, but you really can learn essentially anything you need, you know, online, or even just making it yourself. And that really the most valuable thing is the people, the other students, and sort of the connections you can build, just in terms of you know, building out a group and almost a family of you know, like-minded people. And I think it's interesting because, so, you know, coming from different places, both Henry and I, you know, while at BuzzFeed, BuzzFeed sort of operated in a lot of ways like a film school, but even probably, you know, faster and sort of
No theory.
no theory, and just practice. And because of that, and this film is actually really kind of an example of it. It's like, we gravitated, you know, obviously there were people with different, you know, intentions and aspirations at BuzzFeed, but like, sort of the people that were kind of a bit more sort of into traditional kind of film and TV, and wanted to kind of take the digital practice and take it to, you know, some of the longer formats. We kind of gravitated towards each other. And you know, it's become sort of, we help each other out. It's like, someone has a short film that they want to test out an idea, like, we call each other up. And it's I think the community is really the most important thing. But you can find community without film school, as we did in this movie. So
Yeah, that was actually exactly one of the things that I was gonna bring up, was like, how was it coming, you know, out of film school and going to BuzzFeed, where like you said, it's a lot of like, okay, well, now you just need to learn it by doing it. We're not going to teach you, like you said, the theory and anything like that.
yeah, so I went to Chapman University,
Hmm.
down in Orange County, and it was sort of it was very much a positive experience. But it is true that the education there, and probably to any film school, was, you know, one of, this is how movies are made,
Hmm.
which is true. It's like, this is, you know, you need to get the producer first, you have to develop the script this way, you have to go through all these checklists, and it's becomes very, I think, rigid, and they're sort of preparing you for the slow moving process that is film production, or TV. And while that's a helpful thing to learn, I found myself personally, you know, a little bit sort of dismayed, and sort of it felt like an overwhelming sort of expectation for the industry, which,
Hmm.
you know, was rapidly changing, and is still rapidly changing, you know, as the years went on. But you know, BuzzFeed, you know, sort of drew my attention as sort of, you know, a company that was sort of really rising up, I suppose, the ranks in terms of content. And they were really declaring sort of an interest in, you know, longer form content and scripted content. And so it was really actually it was quite freeing to be able to go to a place where it's just like, oh wait, we don't have to sit around in a you know, a boardroom type space, and like talk ad nauseum about sort of, you know, the 3 act structure of this five minute film. It's like, just go out and make it. And you know, I think it's hard. You know, I think a lot of film schools are probably quite reactive to this now, but
Hmm.
you know, it's just the nature, as Henry mentioned too, of work today is because technology allows it, and because there's so many people making stuff. I mean, you really can do most things yourself, and you really don't need to wait for, you know, the key holders, if you will, to sort of get in. It's you know, 9 times out of 10, it's better to just make the thing and just move on, because that's going to be the best education anyway. It's not theory, it's actual practice.
This is like a heavy question, but in your opinion, is that kind of where you see the industry going, filled with these people who can do and have, you know, come up to doing everything and be like, oh, well, I can edit this if you need it, but I can also light the scene if you need that. And I can also do this. Like,
well, I think there's always there's definitely always specialization, and there are just people that are just masters. I mean, Roger Deakins is Roger Deakins because he's Roger Deakins. You know what I mean? Like no one can touch that guy. I mean, and so I think at a certain point, if you're fortunate enough to work with these masters, but I would venture to say that even people that are really well known for one specialized craft or skill within the film industry, they have a really good knowledge of writing or of directing. And I think in a general sense, I think it seems to be that as technology allows it, not only does it not hurt to sort of orient yourself to all phases of production or the process, but it's helpful for everybody else. It helps you be a better communicator. It helps you be better at sort of carrying out a vision, from whatever sort of angle of the project you're coming from.
Yeah. And I think also that, unfortunately, the more specialized you are, the more vulnerable you are to unexpected changes to the industry, to technology. I mean, it can be very helpful to sort of stay nimble and on your toes and be able to pick up new skills, because the industry is going to just keep changing. I mean, who knows? Maybe we're all going to be making video games in 20 years. I have no idea. But I think it's important that even if you are specialized, it's important to keep learning.
So with both of y'all having a, swath of experience for all these different credits, what is each of y'all's specific, like, favorite part of the process, if you can pick one, from like directing and editing and writing and everything else that y'all have done?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's sometimes I do find myself feeling like when I'm writing, all I want to be doing is shooting. And when I'm shooting, all I want to be doing is editing. And when I'm editing, all I'm doing is rewriting. And so, but I think kind of, I don't know if Henry, you come from the same point. I think we've talked about this, but like, for me, there's something really, I think nothing really replaces sort of the actual production process and being able to, end the day having crossed things out, because I personally, I certainly fall victim to the sort of overthinking, overwhelmed by possibilities, whether it's the blank page or it's, bins of raw footage. And so there's something about, production, just maybe it's because of the sort of limitations and the necessity and needing to make the day, and you have direct sort of responsibility, that it sort of, turns that part of your brain off and it turns into execution. And I think there's nothing better than sort of the magic of, when you or the actors or somebody sort of makes a tweak in a scene, and then suddenly you see it transform in front of you, and you get caught up in it, and you forget that that this is a job, because it doesn't feel like one.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think obviously the collaborative nature of the production process is pretty magical, and that's where the memories happen. Those are the experiences that you actually can walk away from and years later really think back on. I don't really tend to remember very clearly moments editing as much. But that being said, I do love throwing the headphones on and just tapping into the matrix and disappearing for 8 hours while I'm editing. I mean, that I can do that to no end. So it's a toss up between the two. And then writing is an essential but brutal part of the process. That's a necessary evil.
So we skipped over it a little bit, but I do actually want to go back a little bit to Steven, because we heard about film school and everything, but one of my favorite things to hear is what actually inspired you to do this full time.
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, and similarly around the middle school age, of course, love movies, and would make little sketches with my friends. It's actually funny. My entry point is a little bit more from music first. I was in sort of my core group of friends, starting in kind of middle school all through high school, actually, as we were in a rock band. And that was sort of how we were, known around school. And so I grew up playing piano, and, we would need to film sort of our sets or film little, dumb music videos. And so a lot of the first actual practical need for video for me kind of came from that. But of course, very, very quickly it was like, we'd be shooting, a dumb little like fake behind the scenes sort of Spinal Tap-esque kind of thing. And then it would just turn into like, us like filming, recreations from like The Matrix. And so it like just left music and then just became, just like honoring like the movies that I love. So that was sort of the, falling in love with film and all of this. And so, after that, the decision was to, come out to California and went to Chapman and, got as I mentioned before, it's an excellent program, and it was sort of amazing just to be able to, be sitting in a class, with people that are, as crazy about The Matrix as I am. And yeah. And so, after that, worked in, advertising for a bit, worked at a couple of digital like agencies prior to Buzzfeed, and sort of, got a little bit of a better sense of sort of, how to work as an editor primarily. And so editing really, I don't think this is any surprise to anyone, but it's just like there's such a growing need for it. And it's really sort of a bankable way to try to be an independent, filmmaker or contractor. It's really helpful to be able to edit because, you can sort of, at least hopefully, pay your bills as you're working on your sort of larger passion projects.
That's a really good point as far as that goes, because that's like you said, it's I keep hearing from everybody is that editing is always an interesting point because you're kind of tapping into everything. So like you said, you can live your dream of doing this, but edit in the background and still pay the bills. Now, I do have one thing before I do the final wind down. I go through y'all's IMDb's like I always like to. And Henry has such a good one that I just have to inquire on.
Oh no.
Which is, can you solve this college mystery? Who is making sexy movies in the dorm?
Wow. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm less embarrassed that you're bringing that one up than some of the other things on my IMDb. Because I'm kind of proud of that one. Yeah, I did. So this was actually back when I was at Buzzfeed. I made this trilogy of shorts that were part of a digital series. They're very, talk about Edgar Wright. They're very Edgar Wright or sort of Tarantino inspired shorts that are very, very silly, borderline sketch comedy about a young, very strange young college student who solves utterly meaningless mysteries around her college campus. You can check them out. They're on YouTube. I think that one got age gated because there's some explicit material in there.
Nice.
But it actually is way less explicit or R rated than it sounds. They're pretty chaste, pretty innocent shorts, but they're fun. They were part of this sort of ongoing experiment in narrative filmmaking that we were trying out at Buzzfeed, where we were really trying to, YouTube isn't necessarily a place where people go to find long form narrative content. And we were trying to experiment and maybe try to change that. And so that was part of that initiative.
Yes, everybody should check these out. By the way, they're available on YouTube because they're amazing. They're amazing. They're quirky and crazy, and it's Henry did a. Honestly, I remember when those came out when we were still working at Buzzfeed, and I was just like completely floored. I was like, "How did you?" Because there's like so many scenes and setups, and again, it was probably over the course of like less than a week that you were like doing each one.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing this again. It kind of honestly was making the film. It's just you kind of black out and it just you wake up one day and the film's in the can.
You're like, how did any of that happen, man?
Yeah.
I don't remember any of that. So as we talk about things that you're embarrassed of and everything like that, and like really wind down, without doing the end of us, because that's a cop out. I won't have it here. What is your favorite project that you've done? Most memorable? It doesn't necessarily have to be favorite, but like most memorable thing that you learned the most on, anything like that. What would be that project for y'all?
I know mine.
Go.
This was maybe 2 years ago, right before the end of us. I co-directed a short with a good friend of mine, Derek DeBlasis, who actually plays Tim in the End of Us.
Oh, nice.
And he's also a filmmaker. He's the lead in this short film. It's called Barking, and it stars him. My girlfriend Claudia, who produced The End of Us, plays his ex-girlfriend in the film, and it's about a couple. You'll see there's some connective tissue here, but it's about a couple that breaks up, and they both own a dog, and they're trying to share ownership of this dog.
Oh.
And the reason I bring it up is because we employed a kind of similar style. We shot it on it's very lo-fi. We shot it on a 5D. It's in black and white, but we had no crew. It was just me with a camera, the actors, no lights. We didn't have a sound person, so we recorded sound on iPhones. We just put iPhones in the actors' pockets, and the whole thing was sort of an exercise in minimalism. And we shot it over the course of maybe 9 months. But again, the whole point was just to see how can we strip down the film to such an extent that all that matters is the characters in the story, and what is the sort of lowest lift film we can make that actually looks good and is palatable.
Wow, dang, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, there was a series of videos that I did while at Buzzfeed that were these like fake trailers. And so I bring those up because like it was pretty early on when I was working there, and we were doing a lot of sort of like format stuff, a lot of like unscripted content. It was still pretty early days, and there wasn't really much seemingly like appetite, on their like platform for like scripted narrative stuff, and the sort of the data driven approach. There were all these powwows and conversations at BuzzFeed about how to better engage and why do people share things online. And I was just so gung ho on like proving that you could try to do something scripted that could be like viral, I guess, and almost out of like manic just energy, just like completely threw myself into this if bros were in rom-coms sort of format. And I found myself like it was actually like, for me, I'm kind of a crazy person, and oftentimes I think in trailers, and I sort of discovered in doing that like how much I really enjoy sort of the speed and the sort of insane kind of editing style, and sort of like being able to kind of manufacture what feels like a 2-hour movie in a in a piece that of course doesn't contain anything but these trailer moments. And it proved to be very successful, and we were able to do a few more, and it was just a good lesson. And just like sometimes it's okay to take the lid off and just like go completely crazy on something, because it was one of those things where it was like I watch it now, and I don't even, it's kind of funny, as Henry mentioned, sort of the fever dream of like some of these projects. Like I watch them now, and I'm like, I don't know how I edited this. Like I like can't even remember, because it was just such a fun process to sort of like just fully lean into genres, and then again make something fast and that just sort of like hits you in the face.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, because I work on video game trailers, I always tell people like editing trailers is such a good exercise as far as getting pacing down and like being able to tell a story in anywhere from 30 seconds to 230. It's such a good exercise, just for editors to play around with. And like you said, you get in that manic state where you're just like, I gotta hit all these moments. It's gotta be amazing.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, Steve and I talk about for new projects, we're always talking about, okay, what would be the trailer for this movie? Because it isn't just an exercise in trying to determine whether something's commercial or not. It's actually an exercise in, okay, what is this? What is the feeling of this movie? What is the movie really about? What would the trailer actually focus on? Because you oftentimes, similar with writing a synopsis, if you've made a film and then you can't make the trailer for it, or the trailer isn't quite working, it probably means that the movie isn't going to work. So
wow,
that's been a useful tool for us as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point that I've just never even thought of, but that's true. And it's so often that you're like, wow, that trailer either just completely misrepresents the film, or it's like, oh, the trailer has the only good moments in the whole film. Is like two super common things. So that's a really good point about trailers and films and everything.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, out of necessity, a trailer. Of course, we all there's the stereotype of the trailer sort of being, uh, it's I mean it is a piece of marketing, it is a piece of advertising at the end of the day. But as Henry mentioned, it's like it is a good exercise in distilling, how the idea could be sort of why would people watch this movie, and you can't ever really control the response to a project that you work on, but you can sort of anticipate it, and it's helpful to think about, like, well, does this movie actually, like, to a completely outside observer, how would they even relate to it? Like, what is going to stand out to them? And so it's a really helpful process, as Henry mentioned, in writing.
Well, that is like such a good place to end it. Not only, favorite projects, but also a really good piece of advice at the end for anybody looking to make their own film. So thank you guys so much for being on here. Steve and Henry, like, y'all are fantastic guests. It was an awesome time.
Oh, our pleasure. It's so refreshing to actually talk about the project and film in depth. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, is there anywhere like Instagram or Twitter or anything that you want to send people to that y'all have?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to let's see, it's the end of us film.com. You can check out info about the movie, and hopefully we'll have some info up there sooner rather than later about when it'll be released. So check it out, theendofusfilm.com.
Everybody make sure to check out The End of Us when it releases. It is a very good time. And also follow Steve and Henry's careers because they are awesome. So thank you guys so much. Remember, if you'd like to check out this podcast, we are everywhere that you can find podcasts, on Spotify and Apple and everywhere else. On YouTube, just search for the Just an Editor podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the edit bay.